CBT Nuggets JNCIS Security Series, Security Policy Basics Part 2. Well, let's continue from our previous policy nugget. We'll do a quick little review of security policy, then we'll dive right in, and this entire nugget will be configuration, configuration, configuration. Okay, just in case it's been a while since you looked at policy part 1, let's do a quick review. A policy is going to permit, it's going to deny, or can even tunnel certain designated types of traffic between two endpoints unidirectionally. Unidirectionally in the sense that you have a to and a from policy. Every policy consists of a unique policy name. You'll have a from zone and a to zone. For example, you could configure a zone this way: set security policy from zone untrust to zone trust. You also need to have a set of match criteria that's going to define the characteristics, the attributes that you have to satisfy to be able to apply the policy rule. Match criteria are based on the source IP address, destination IP address, as well as services, otherwise known as applications, and we'll see those here in a second. You also have a set of actions that are performed in case you have a match. A permit action, a deny action, or a reject action. These aren't the only types of actions. As we can see down here, you can include accounting and auditing elements like counting, logging, and structured system logging. Okay, with that refresher out of the way, let's go ahead and go over to one of my SRXs and kind of start from scratch and build some explicit security policies. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to explicitly configure our interfaces and security zones. So I want to get into Edit Security Zones area of the configuration. And we're going to set the security zone of trust. We'll put interfaces. This is my SRX 100. So I'm going to put FE001 as a trusted interface. Now, I could just stop here, but I want to go ahead and configure that host inbound traffic, right? The traffic that is destined to this particular SRX on this interface. In other words, those system services for traffic that's going to terminate on this security gateway. So I'm going to do host inbound traffic and then system services. Okay, we saw this earlier, and here's the list of system services. Now I could be, very explicit here and just allow a handful of services to terminate on this SRX. For example, maybe DHCP, DNS, HTTPS, ping, secure shell. You get the idea. Or I can just go ahead and say system services all. And this is probably a good way to approach this right off the bat early on, because we're not talking about transit traffic here. Now let's go ahead and set the security zone for the untrust, and that is going to be interface on this device, and you need to have this all thought out before you do this, 000. And then we'll do that host inbound traffic, by the way. And we'll go ahead and say, for us, system services, again, we'll just do all here. Okay, so those are our two interfaces in our security zones in addition to the host inbound traffic services. Now, let's create our security policy to allow traffic from the trust zone to the untrust zone. Okay, now we know there's a default, but we need to do this explicitly because this is part of your learning process. You need to know how to do this. So I'm going to go to the top and I'm going to edit security policies for the from zone, which is trust, to the to zone, which is untrust. Okay. Now look at the configuration mode we're in. And again, so there's one of our major elements we have to have, right? From and to. It's unilateral. Now we need to have a name, and I'm going to go ahead and use a name called permit all, which is a very common thing that we would see in a Junos configuration on an SRX, and it's going to be the one that I'm going to apply because I'm going to permit all traffic from the trust zone to the untrust zone. So I'm going to set the policy. I'm going to call this permit all. I'm going to use all uppercase letters because it's user defined. I need to match the source address, and I'm going to go ahead and put any in there. So we're going to use that address book any. Next, in the same policy permit all, I'm going to match the destination address, and we'll say any. Now, while I'm looking at this, one thing that you might want to do, and I'm not going to do this here, but on this match source address any, it wouldn't be a bad idea to put, instead of any, go back to the nugget earlier and look at the address books and create an address book entry for your entire internal network, right? That just represents your internal corporate LAN. One thing about that is that you're going to be kind of reducing the attack surface for spoofing, okay? And it also would prevent somebody from the inside from spoofing some other source address besides just your corporate LAN. So, at this level, at the kind of first JNCIS security level, we keep things pretty simple. But I want to go along as I go along. I want to give you some ideas of some things to do to maybe do some advanced security. And reducing that attack surface and creating a address book for your internal LAN wouldn't be a bad idea. Now just remember, when you do that, make sure that the prefix that you use in that internal LAN address book, or if you're going to do address sets, is it going to accommodate for future growth, right? Make sure that you don't limit yourself by putting too stringent of a prefix on there. Make sure it's broad enough to cover any future needs. So we're going to do destination address any, and that'll pretty much always be any. You're saying all of your inside hosts can create sessions to the untrust zone anywhere out there. Then we're going to say, what about services? Okay, so we're going to say permit all match services. Now, services are basically the applications that we're going to be matching. Okay, this includes default ports and protocols that are going to be seen in the TCP/IP packet header. We can also include a timeout there, even though there's some default timeouts. Now, this is a stateful firewall we're dealing with. So when an incoming packet, or a packet, for example, going inbound to the trust interface is matched and an action is performed, then an entry identifying this packet and its action is going to be put in a session table in memory so that subsequent packets will be processed faster, right? Now, you have a timeout value, and if there's no subsequent packets that match that same criteria within that timeout threshold, then that entry gets purged from memory. By the way, you can only have a finite amount of entries in memory, and so that's why you have to be very careful about deploying the right platform for your environment. Now, we don't really have to configure explicit services here usually at the branch from the trust zone to the untrust zone. So if I do match applications, okay, I'm going to give them a little bit more information and do a question mark, you can see these are all of the kind of default applications that Junos is going to inspect, okay? Traffic that initiates on the inside trust zone going to the outside, okay? So basically it's inbound on this fast Ethernet 001 interface, okay, inbound and transiting the SRX going out to the untrust zone. So you can see all these services in here. So usually we don't have to worry about enabling certain services, but I've got a special scenario that I'm going to set up here in a second to allow a service that's not on this list, okay? And it comes right from a real world environment that I've dealt with. So, but you can see there's a huge list here of all these applications and services, okay? Now, when this actually comes into play is, for example, if you're going to set up a zone for a DMZ, right? Now, I'm going to go ahead and say all here. So I'm going to go ahead and just match all of these. But if you were setting up a separate zone for a DMZ, which is where you're going to have your public-facing servers, that is one of those areas where you're going to want to have a pretty strict list of applications that you're going to allow from the untrusted zone into the DMZ. In other words, you only want to allow services or applications. You only want to permit the ones that you have servers for in the DMZ. Also, if you're going to allow hosts on the trust zone or the inside of your corporate network to get limited access to servers in your DMZ, for example, to upload web content or put stuff on file servers or FTP servers, then you're going to have a limited set of applications that you're going to permit from the trust zone to the DMZ zone. Okay, hope that makes sense to you. Remember, there is a then statement, so I'm going to say set policy, and this is permit all. So what are we going to do? The action, we're going to permit, okay? Now, there is an explicit deny at the end of this, okay? So we know there's a default deny all. And then what that means is if a host on the inside, regardless of the address, tries to create a session to the outside where I don't have an application on this list, then it will not be allowed from the trust zone to the untrust zone. Okay, so it has to be inspected. It has to be an application on this list. And by the way, this list covers pretty much most anything you could deal with, but I'm going to give you an exception here. Okay, now that's the security policy to allow traffic from the trust zone to the untrust zone. Now let's go ahead and we'll go back to the top here, and we want to edit the security policies to deny traffic from the untrust zone to the trust zone. Now, why are we going to create this very strict policy? And we'll say from zone untrust to zone trust. Why are we going to create this very strict policy, which is basically going to say deny everything from the untrust zone to the trust zone? Well, here's the deal. For the branch office, it's actually pretty rare that a remote office or a branch office has a server, that it's serving the public network. Okay? Usually the corporate servers are at the headquarters or the head end in their DMZ, okay, in their separate zones. So on a very particular case-by-case basis, do we want to allow a server on the trust zone to service the untrusted network, untrusted internet? That's a very dangerous thing to do. And so at this level, kind of the fundamental beginner level, we just want to not do that at all. We want to basically lock it down so that no sessions can initiate in the untrust zone to a host on the trust zone. Okay, so we're going to set the policy, and we're going to call this deny all, and we want to match the source address and want some more information, and we'll say any source. We're going to match any source that's in the untrust zone, and then we'll set our next match statement to say to match destination address, and that's basically any address in the trust zone in our corporate branch LAN, and then we'll say matching any application, and that's going to be any. And then what is our action going to be? Set policy deny all, then we're going to deny. Okay, so no exceptions, and we're actually putting an explicit deny statement in there. And like I said, for most branch offices, this is the way you're going to do things. Okay, and then you, especially at the outset, and then you will eventually, on a case-by-case basis, if necessary, start opening up a server or a service on the trust zone and expose that to the untrusted network. Your better option, though, if you have the port density on your gateway, is to create another zone, like a DMZ zone, and put those servers in there and have a separate policy that is going to be, you know, from zone untrust to zone DMZ, right? And so in the DMZ, you'll have almost all of the traffic will be coming from the untrust zone to the DMZ. You'll have only a rare circumstance where any servers in the DMZ would be the from zone. Okay, because usually if you put servers in the DMZ, right, they shouldn't be initiating sessions. Now there's a couple of examples where they might be using Windows update services, or they may be, you know, doing some SMTP relay, but normally the servers in the DMZ shouldn't be generating sessions. Okay, you don't want admins logging onto those DMZ servers and going up and downloading pirated software. They shouldn't be creating sessions, because think about it, if they can create sessions, and especially to other zones, they could have malware placed on them, or worms, or bots, or advanced persistent threats, or rats, or other types of malware. And if they can actually create sessions to other zones, then they can spread malware to other parts of your network or outside to other hosts on the internet. So that's really the approach we take. Now, once I'm done here, and I am done, I can go to the top and I can do a show security policies. And we'll see something interesting here. Start out here. Notice that I've got a default policy. Okay, this is the default trust to untrust policy on my SRX, and I did this on purpose. Okay, I've also got in the from trust to untrust, I've got another policy that is user defined called permit all. Now, here's where you have to be careful. And this goes into policy processing. Remember, policies process from the top down. Now, this is not going to be a problem because basically this one's going to match, right? Because it's any permit. This one's not even going to be in play, okay? So if there was something that I was trying to do in here explicitly, okay, it wouldn't be affected. So what I'm going to have to do is, in order to make this user-defined policy active, I need to go ahead and delete this trust to untrust policy, which I'm going to go ahead and do here in a second. Now here you can see my from zone untrust to zone trust. I've got my deny all policy and basically matching any source address, any destination, any application. Let's go ahead and go into this mode and delete that trust to untrust policy. Show you how to do that. So let's edit the security policy, the from zone trust to zone untrust. And we wanted to delete the policy trust to untrust. Now, if this didn't exist, for example, if this wasn't the name of it, it would just give you an error message saying it couldn't find it. So now if we do a show security policy, all we see is our permit all statement and our deny all statement. Okay, and we're also, don't forget, we're also allowing all of our services, inbound host services, on the fast 001 interface and fast 000 interface in the trust and untrust zone for what we call self traffic, okay, traffic that's destined to this SRX. Now let me show you another example here of what I might have to do in the inside zone. Let me give you my scenario. Okay, we saw the list of applications and services, right? Well, let's say that this branch office is actually a recording studio that is part of a larger organization, like let's say Sony, for example. So I'm a recording studio. At the recording studio, I need to allow, I've brought in some artists, and they want to be able to do live jam sessions with other members of their band. They can't all be there for the studio session, but they're working on writing a song that they need to get into the new album. Okay, so they need one more song for the album, but they can't get all the musicians there. So they're going to use an online service called eJamming to allow them to create these sessions where they can go up and they can play together all at the same time, kind of like Skype, but without any latency, right? So it's a really cool service. I'll show you what it looks like here, and then I'll show you how we have to open up a hole in the firewall to use this service because it's not on our application list, right? So let me pause this for a second. Okay, so here's the program that we would use at our recording studio to do this kind of jamming collaborative network over the internet in real time with zero latency. It's called eJamming, eJamming Audio, AUDIIO. Now the key is this particular software uses UDP port 26900, okay, 26900. That's not on the list of applications that my SRX gateway is going to inspect. Now, even though I said, applications any, I still have to add this protocol, this eJamming audio, to the SRX gateway at the recording studio. Now, the way I would do this, by the way, is I would probably, if I'm going to have individual users at my recording studio, have this set up where you have one or more individuals playing, keyboards or bass or guitar or vocals or drums, and they're doing this particular service. I would put them in their own DMZ. Okay, so let's just take that approach. Let's say we're going to have our own zone, security zone, that's an extranet. Okay, this is a prime example of what an extranet is. It's kind of a partner network. So we'll call this XNet, EXNET. And what we'll do is I'll show you how to configure the applications that you need just for this XNet. So let's go back over to the CLI. Now, let me just show you this. You can also do a show groups, Junos defaults, and then applications. And you can see all of your applications. Okay, I showed them to you earlier kind of in the context of configuring a security policy, which really isn't always the best way to do this. So you can see there's just you see 5%. So there's tons of these, right? So first off, for this XNet, right, at this recording studio, we want to look at our default applications, the Junos defaults, and see which of these we want to open up with the other recording studios. Maybe some things besides that e-jamming, right? So in this particular zone, on this interface, we might want FTP, for example. We might need to transfer files. Maybe you've got charts or lyrics or PDF files or text files. So we want to have FTP services. So we might want to think about that. We might want to think about maybe some DNS services, HTTP services, HTTPS, and again, noticing what ports they're using. And one of the things that would be a good exercise for you to do is to get onto your SRX and to go through this area and kind of look at some of these ports and remember some of these port numbers. It's really good to kind of memorize some of the most popular ones, right, that we would use. Some of the things that are out there, like NTP is port 123, IMAP is port 143, syslog uses port 514. Okay, that's only 15%, so I'm not going to go through all of those, but we'll get an idea of what we're going to do. So for my XNet, I want to have HTTP, I want to have ping, I want to have DNS UDP. So I want to have DNS queries, not DNS TCP, because I'm not doing any zone transfers, but DNS UDP. And then we'll have FTP in case we need to have an FTP server so that we can, store WAV files or MP3 files or charts or transcription of songs, whatever, all the stuff we would do in a musical studio. So let me go up here and clear the screen. Okay, we need to go ahead and set, first of all, applications, and then an application for e-jamming. So we have to add this to the list, okay? And I'm putting it in all capital letters so we'll know it's user defined. Now the source port is 26,900 and the destination port is also 26,900 and the protocol is UDP. And we can also set an inactivity period, and this is an activity timeout. This is probably pretty important, but for this particular service, I might want to have kind of a longer timeout. Okay, I don't want to have to keep reestablishing this session, especially if it's doing kind of on the internet live jamming or live rehearsals, or actually you can actually record the process as well. So I'm going to go ahead and do an activity timeout. I'll do 1800 seconds, which is a good 30 minutes. Okay, so I'm going to set that. Now, I need to commit this ultimately, okay, but that is on the list now of applications. And also in my policies, I could use e-jamming now from the trust network to the untrust zone, right? Because it's now, since I put applications any in the security policy, this is now included as one of the any, okay? But let's say I'm going to create an application set that I'm going to invoke in my policy for my XNet, okay, a different zone. So I'm going to set applications, and didn't like that, applications, and I'm going to do an application set. Let's see if I have that option here before I go any further. Yeah, application set, and I got to put in most of it. And let's go ahead and call this, this is the XNet application set. This is my extranet that I'm setting up just for musicians and band members and producers and the like on it, and I'm going to have another interface, okay, assigned to this zone. So I'm separating this from my trust network, right? And I'm going to have a whole separate security policy for it. And I'm going to say application, and then we'll do the first one will be e-jamming. So we're going to have e-jamming out there in the XNet. We're going to have Junos HTTP out there. We'll have, let's go ahead and do Junos HTTPS. Okay, if we want to have some secure activities going on, we might want to set it up some type of SSL TLS type activities out there. We want to do Junos ping. We want to do, as I said, Junos DNS UDP for DNS queries, the ping pong service. Again, DNS also uses TCP, but we're not doing any zone transfers, so we don't need that. And then finally, we'll do Junos FTP because, like I said, we'll have an FTP server out there to store WAV files, MP3 files, graphics files, all the stuff that we need to upload and download between these musicians and producers. Okay, let's edit the security zones, and we're going to set a security zone, and we're going to call this XNet. In the interfaces of XNet, we'll put FastE002 into the XNet zone. Okay, let's go ahead and do that host inbound traffic, system services all, just in case you need to go ahead and remotely access that particular zone, and we'll have all of those self-services on that XNet. Okay, the next thing I want to do is I want to create an address book entry. So I need to exit back one level, and I'm going to set an address. Let me see, I think I need to be in a different mode. Security maybe? And do set, there we go, set address book. So what am I doing here? Well, I've got a subnetwork in the extranet, okay? So that all the hosts, anything that's going to be in the extranet at this recording studio is going to be in the 172.16.10.0/24 network. So I'm creating an address book entry, okay? The address book is called EXADDR. The address EX1 is 172.16.10.0/24. Okay, so I can use this address book entry in my policy, which I'm going to do. All right, so let's go ahead now and create our security policy to allow traffic from the trust zone to the XNet zone. Why? Well, if I'm putting FTP servers out there, if I'm putting web servers out there, I may need to update the web content. I may need to get information onto those FTP servers from the trust zone. But I don't want to just say any application. Okay, so let's go ahead and edit security policies, and then the from zone is trust, and the to zone is XNet. Okay, so the first thing we want to do is we want to set our policy, and we're going to say, call this permit XNet. We want to match the source address would be any. So any source address in the trust network is fine, right? But the destination address is going to be that address book, right? EXADDR. Okay, so we're leveraging that knowledge of the address book. So the destination address is only going to be 172.16.10.0/24 because we're going to permit it, but then there's the default deny all. So next, how about the applications? Okay, well, we want to set this permit XNet policy. We want to match our application, and we're going to use our set of applications called XNet. Remember, we created that earlier. That includes the e-jamming on UDP port 26900, Junos HTTP, HTTPS, ping, DNS UDP, and FTP. So then we will set the policy permit XNet, then we will permit. Okay, so that's the policy, the restrictive policy for workstations in the trust zone to be able to access those servers in the XNet. Okay, let's go ahead and create a policy now between the untrust zone and the XNet zone. Now remember, these are unilateral policies, so for the XNet out there, you probably want to have a security policy from the untrust zone to the XNet and vice versa. Let's just go ahead now and create the security policy from the untrust zone to the XNet, okay, which basically has all those servers in it. So we're going to edit, oops, I need to get top, edit, security policies. The from zone is untrust, and the to zone is XNet, okay. All right, let's set our policy. We'll call this untrust to X, untrust to X. And we'll say that the source address can be pretty much anything because we're not really quite sure where all of those other musicians are going to be, right? So we'll say source address can be any. But then the destination address, we've already determined that that's going to be that EXADDR address book, right? 172.16.10.0/24. And we've also determined that the applications that they can use are the XNet apps. We need to have an action, so we'll set policy, then permit. Okay, I cleared my screen so we can get back up to the top here. Now I can do a show security policies. And we can see that we've got our originals, but now we've also go down here. We can see we've got our from zone trust to zone XNet. It's telling me this because I haven't committed this yet. All right, I did the commands, but I haven't committed this. Normally, you would create your security zones like I did. Remember, set security zone XNet interfaces, and then commit it. It hasn't been committed yet, so it's saying, look, I'm kind of creating these policies on this unofficially defined security zone. But you can see what we're doing here. In our trust to XNet, we're allowing internal users to get access to XNet servers from any address only to the 172.16.10.0/24 network, and only for the applications e-jamming, HTTP, HTTPS, ping, DNS, UDP, and FTP. Okay. All right, I'm back over on my SRX 210. Now I want to explore a different type of policy structure where we're actually going to deny unwanted outbound traffic from users in our trust zone to the untrust zone. So for example, we know that we're permitting all these applications. I might want to block certain programs and protocols. For example, I might not want my internal users at this branch office to do things like instant messaging clients, for example, and maybe some of those popular peer-to-peer file sharing applications. So we need to explicitly go ahead and block those. So let's get into Edit, Applications, and then an application set, and we'll call this Deny SRVS, Deny Services. I'm going to do the dash because that's what I've been doing so far. Stay consistent. Okay, so we're now in that edit mode. We need to set application, and again, boom, we can do all that. Okay, but we're going to do, let's deny Junos Yahoo Messenger. Let me get back to the top here. Okay, so we got deny Yahoo Messenger right there. We want to deny MSN. Let's deny IRC. That can be part of a botnet, so that's not good. Let's go ahead and deny, how about Junos Nutella, for example, and we'll do one more, AOL, another attack vector. So there's a good little laundry list there. Okay, so now we want to have a policy that applies to everyone from the trust zone to the untrust zone. Okay, I had to stop and restart because I forgot to go to the top. So I'm going to go top, edit, security policies, and then it's the from zone is trust and the to zone is untrust. Okay, so now I want to set the policy. I'm going to call this not died, but denied apps, and we're going to match the source address as being, and you know, you could do this for just a certain address book or a certain department. If you only wanted to allow certain departments to use these services, you could match those source addresses. I'm going to go ahead and use any. I don't want anybody in the inside trust zone using these services. Basically going to be any there as well. And then what's the application? If it was just one, let's say, you know, Junos AOL, I could just put in there Junos AOL. But I've got an application set, and it's deny SRVS. Okay, so I've got my match aspect of this, but when you're blocking traffic as part of your then statement, okay, the action you're going to take, you have a couple of options. So I'll show you that here. We're going to say set policy, the then statement, a couple of options here. Now, this is very important, so listen carefully. The deny flag you're going to use almost all the time, exclusively, because it silently drops the connection, and this is so crucial. Okay, your other option is to use reject, but we really want to reject. Okay, the reject flag is a real big difference. It does drop the packet, and if you want to log it, you can log it as well. But it sends an ICMP port unreachable packet to the initiating source host for every packet that gets rejected. This is a problem because it can be used as reconnaissance. It can be used to fingerprint the system. It can also be used as part of an ICMP flooding attack. Okay, so for example, what if the source of this was actually some other company's spoofed IP address? you were spoofing their IP address and you end up flooding some other person on the internet. Okay, so we always want to go ahead and use the deny option. So then we'll deny, and we want to do logging. Okay, now I'm going to talk about logging in the next nugget because I'm kind of running out of time here, but I'm going to go ahead and configure this now. I'll do a log, and if you're going to do logging, you have to follow it up with this command, session close and session init. And I'll talk more about that when we get over there in part 3. Okay, I'm going to have a part 3 of this. So we're denying and logging. Very important. Now you can do a show here, and we can see we've got policy trust to untrust, which is part of our from zone trust to zone untrust. Okay, so in this security policy we have trust to untrust, and we have policy denied apps. Okay, hopefully you're seeing a problem right now, and it goes back to that issue we looked at earlier with the way that policies are evaluated. Okay, remember they're evaluated from the top down. So if you look at this, you can notice that any application is going to be permitted. Okay, well, once that matches, that's all that's going to happen, and we'll never get to this policy. You following me? So, and this is really a general rule of creating policies. You want your more specific granular policies, especially your denies, to go in front of or before the kind of generic permitting policies. So I need to move denied apps and put it in front of trust to untrust so that these services will be denied, and they'll be denied and logged, and when they don't match, they'll go on to the next policy, and this will get the rest of the applications which will be permitted, right? Okay, so how do we do that? Well, we need to get back to the top, and we're going to insert security policies from the trust zone to the untrust zone, and it's going to be policy denied apps needs to go before policy trust to untrust, correct? Excellent. Now if we do a show, we can see, oops, I don't want to do a show there. Let's go back and do edit security policy, and we'll do a show there. Okay, and I want to see the whole configuration. And now we can see that denied apps is going to be evaluated before trust to untrust, and therefore these applications and services will get denied and logged, and then the rest of the applications will be permitted. Okay, beautiful. Now, technically, I should do a proof of concept here, which is to basically try to open up MSN Messenger or open up what I would do if I had time, and I don't. Okay, so just trust me on this. I could open up a web browser and I could show you that I could connect with a web browser to the internet, which you've already seen me do before. I don't really want to install MSN Messenger. I don't really want to install Yahoo Messenger, okay, on this machine. This is a management station. I don't like exposing management stations to chat. But if I were to do that, okay, I could show you that I could use my web browser and get to the internet, and then I could try to connect with MSN Messenger or Yahoo Messenger, and it wouldn't let me. Okay, if you want to do this on your own as a homework assignment and test that out and to get a proof of concept, then I highly recommend it because you really need to get your own hands dirty anyway. So you might want to just go for that. Okay, I want to talk more about this kind of logging thing going on here, and I have some other issues. So I'm going to go ahead and create a part 3 for security policy, and so we'll go ahead and wrap this one up. Now let me just say one more thing about trying that out on your own. Realize that things like the newer versions of Yahoo Messenger, for example, and those peer-to-peer file sharing, those actually have the ability to change ports and to try different options. So it may not work for you if you try that blocking. I showed you this example really from an exam standpoint. We will look at more advanced things later on, like application identification, okay, where you have application firewalls and more advanced features that can accommodate for those very dynamic types of activities. So this was a kind of a simple fundamental example of blocking traffic. However, realize that they're getting much more intelligent and they're able to find more dynamic ports to get around firewalls. All right, in Security Policy Basics Part 2 of the JNCIS Security CBT Nugget series, it was basically configuration, 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 as we looked at several different scenarios that you would be introducing at the branch office. Besides just the trust and untrust zone, I also introduced a extranet zone for my recording studio company, showed some different permit scenarios and deny scenarios, as well as finishing up talking about logging, which is where we're going to take up in the next nugget, which is going to be Security Policy Basics Part 3. I hope this CBT nugget was informative for you. I want to thank you for viewing.